So let's continue working through our example here with our airplanes and baseballs to look at the theory of specialization and trade. Now, in our previous example, what we did is we found the number of goods produced if there was no trade. So country A and country B both made a little bit of both so they could enjoy both. But what they make is what they get to consume, what they get to enjoy. So if there is no trade, then we are bound by the production possibility frontier. If there is no trade, then this production possibility frontier is the maximum amount of two goods that this country or organization gets to enjoy. So that brings us back to our discussion about the Corn Laws. And while the Corn Laws came out in 1815, previous to the Corn Laws, there was a gentleman named Adam Smith. And Adam Smith wrote this book, this is a single book, so big it comes in two parts, called The Wealth of Nations. And this book was written in 1776. So this was the prevailing opinion on trade and economics when the Corn Laws came about. Now, Adam Smith, in The Wealth of Nations, talks about how we are better off, all parties, if we specialize and trade. And so he's talking about how nations can improve and increase their wealth. According to Adam Smith, the way that all economies can grow is if we have free trade. So the idea here is that it's advantageous for countries to import goods and export goods. And according to Adam Smith, everyone is better off if we specialize and trade. So it was Adam Smith who was advocating for free trade. So he would be against the Corn Laws. Okay. Now, Adam Smith says we are better off if we specialize and trade if we each specialize in what we have the absolute advantage in. So we need to define absolute advantage. According to Adam Smith, your country or business has an absolute advantage if it can produce more with fewer materials, cheaper materials, in a faster time, with fewer workers, with less money. If you are more efficient, you are the one who should be producing the good and selling it to everybody else, according to Adam Smith. So Adam Smith says each country should be specializing in what they have the absolute advantage in and trading. So the question is Adam Smith right? So let's go back to our baseball and airplanes example to see what would happen if each country specialized in what they have the absolute advantage in. So we produced our baseballs and airplanes, and we found that country A could make 122 baseballs and country B could make 185 baseballs. So who has the absolute advantage? In our demonstration, we have the same number of people in both countries. We have the same number of resources, our stacks of paper. Okay. The difference here is how long it takes to make a baseball. And if you recall from our previous video, country B only had to count 5 seconds, whereas country A counted 10. So who has the absolute advantage when it comes to making baseballs? Well, we've actually already answered that question when we talked before. And when it comes to making baseballs, country B has the absolute advantage. They're able to produce more with less. All right, what about airplanes? Who has the absolute advantage when it comes to producing airplanes? Well, in our demo, country A had to add 2 seconds between each plane, and country B had to add 20. So who is able to produce more efficiently? We have the same number of people and the same amount of materials here. As you've identified before, country A is able to make more airplanes, and so they have the absolute advantage in airplanes. So let's go with Adam Smith's theory and have country A make only airplanes and country B make only baseballs. So let's look at the number of goods produced. Remember, each country is going to specialize and trade. Okay, so we're going to have country A make 72 airplanes and 0 baseballs. They're going to produce a total of 72 goods. We're going to have country B make baseballs, and they're going to make 185 baseballs. And 0 airplanes. So country B is going to produce a total of 185 goods. So if country B is only making baseballs, then a whole total of 185 baseballs gets made. If country A is only making airplanes, no one else is, 72 total airplanes are produced. So how many total goods get made? So we need to add together 72 and 185, and we get 257. So notice with specialization and trade, a total of 257 goods are produced. If there was no trade, everyone had to make what they would enjoy, then only 214 goods get produced. So already we can see by specializing and trading, there are more goods produced. So far it looks like Adam Smith is right. Collectively, we're better off because more things get made. Well, what about individually? Are we individually better off? Is country A better off? Is country B? Well, in order to figure that out, we have to look not only at what is produced, but what is consumed. How much does country A get to enjoy? How much does country B get to enjoy? And for that to happen, we have to trade. So here we've specialized. The next step is to trade. So we're going to need a trade rate or exchange rate. Okay, and let's assume that our exchange rate, so let's do an exchange rate. In this example, we're going to do 1 airplane for 2 baseballs. Okay, and we said country A was going to make airplanes. So country A is going to make 72 airplanes. Okay, and country B, they were only going to make baseballs, and they're going to make 185 baseballs. All right, so now we need them to trade. Okay, so let's look at how many they could trade and what that would leave them with to consume. Now, ultimately, we're going to compare to this table here where there's no trade. So the best way to do a comparison would be to make one of the numbers the same in both the tables so we can get a good way to compare. So for example, when we did this country A here, they produced 36 airplanes. So let's have country A keep 36 airplanes and sell the rest. Okay, that way we can do a comparison table to table. So if they're going to keep 36 airplanes, how many are they giving away? Well, the 36 airplanes was half the stock. So country A is going to give up 36 airplanes. That's going to leave them with 36. Now, what are they going to get in exchange? So country A is going to take 36 airplanes and give them to country B. So country B is going to have 36 airplanes. But in order for country B to get those 36 airplanes, they're going to have to give up some baseballs. Now, our exchange rate or trade rate is 1 airplane for 2 baseballs. So if country A is giving up 36 airplanes, then for each of those 36, they're going to get 2 baseballs in exchange. So 36 times 2 gives us what? 72. So that means country A is going to give up 36 airplanes, and they're going to get 72 baseballs. Country B is going to give up those 72 baseballs. In exchange, they're going to get the 36 airplanes. So how many baseballs is country B left with? What is 185 minus 72? Well, we get 113 baseballs. So let's put this out on a table so that we can do a comparison. And then we'll show on the graph as well. Okay, so after trade, and we're trading at a rate of 1 airplane, 2 baseballs. Okay. So country A made 72 airplanes, gave up 36 of them, has 36 airplanes left. Of those 72 airplanes, country A keeps 36. They give 36 to country B. That total number of airplanes produced is still 72. Now, country B is making baseballs. They made 185 baseballs. They gave up 72 of them. So country A gets 72 baseballs. And country B is left with 113. The total number of baseballs produced, remember they specialized, country B made all the baseballs, and so they're still at 185 baseballs produced. But now, because we've specialized and traded, country A and B get to consume some baseballs and some airplanes. Now, how many total goods does country A get to enjoy? 72 plus 36 is 108. Country B gets to consume both baseballs and airplanes. And so how many goods collectively do they get to enjoy? 113 plus 36 is 149. The total number of goods produced is the 185 plus 72, which is the same as the number of goods that get to be enjoyed. Country A gets 108 goods, country B gets to enjoy 149. So together, the total number of goods produced and consumed is 257. We already know that this number is higher than if there is no trade. But what about the amount of goods that each country gets to enjoy? To help us see that, let's go back to this table we had before. Not that one. Let's go further back. Let's go to this table where there was no trade and what we produced is what we consumed. So I'm just going to copy this over to our page that we have here. 61, 36, 92, 25. $97. So I'm just transcribing from that other slide. 53, 61, and 214. Okay. All right. So is Adam Smith correct? Well, when we look at the amount that is produced, we can see here that there is more produced. Now let's look at the amount consumed. Because we kept this number the same as this number, we can now actually compare these two tables. You could have instead chosen to make the 25 the same on both instead. But here, country A, if there was no trade, if what they made is what they consumed, then 97 goods would be consumed and enjoyed by country A. With specialization and trade, notice that country A gets to enjoy more goods. Country B, if there was no trade, would have enjoyed 117 goods. Now with specialization and trade, country B gets 149 goods. So notice that if we specialize and trade, more is produced and more is consumed. Both country A and country B got to enjoy more. So is Adam Smith right? Are we better off if we specialize and trade? Should we, instead of closing the border and making everything ourselves, should we instead specialize and buy everything else? Well, according to Adam Smith, if you specialize in what you have the absolute advantage in, that is, if everyone makes what they're most efficient at, then more is produced and more is consumed, and we're better off. We can also show this on our production possibility frontiers. So I'm just going to go to our graphs from before. And we can note those combinations based on trade. So we had found that country A was going to make only airplanes. So they're going to make these 72 airplanes, and then they're going to give them up to get baseballs. And you'll recall we gave up 36 airplanes, and in exchange, country A got 72 baseballs. So what do you notice about that point? Is it possible to get to that point if there is no trade? No, we're outside the production possibility frontier. Now, we could, for example, have country A give up more airplanes. We chose to compare on our tables, giving up 36 airplanes. But what if country A instead gave up 70 airplanes? At an exchange rate or a trade rate of 1 airplane for 2 baseballs, country A would be left with 2 airplanes, which is down here. And what they would get in exchange, well, 70 airplanes, 2 baseballs each, they'd get 140 baseballs. And so we'd be right here. What do you notice about that point? That point is also outside the production possibility frontier. So in fact, we could connect all these dots right here, and these are all the combinations that are possible with trade. And notice they're outside the production possibility frontier. So we can see that country A is better off if they specialize in trade, because we can reach all these points that we couldn't obtain without trade. Well, what about country B? Country B, if they specialized, was making 185 baseballs, and we had them trade baseballs for airplanes. And we had them get 36 airplanes. Okay. So they took their 185 baseballs. They gave up, 72 of them? And they were left with 113. So at 113 baseballs, 36 airplanes. What do you notice about that point? It's outside the production possibility frontier. Is this combination possible without trade? No. Without trade, we're stuck on that PPF. This is not the only combination we can look at on the production possibility frontier. We said a moment ago, what if country A gave up 70 airplanes? Well, in that case, country B would get the 70 airplanes. And what would they get in exchange, or what would they give up in exchange? They would take their 185 baseballs, and at an exchange rate of 1 airplane to 2 baseballs, 70 airplanes would be 140 baseballs, leaving country B with 45. So let's mark here at 45. And they would give up 140 baseballs. They would be left with 45 baseballs. But in exchange for those 140 baseballs, they would get 70 airplanes, which would put them here. Is that point possible without trade? No. And we could actually create a line, connect all these dots. These are all points that are possible with trade. When country B specializes in baseballs, country A specializes in airplanes, then country B is better off because they can get all these points that they couldn't outside the PPF. All those combinations of baseballs and airplanes they could not get when there was no trade. Same thing for country A. So we can see here that Adam Smith is correct. If we specialize in what we have the absolute advantage in, then both country A and country B are better off. More is produced, and all the parties get to consume more as well.